So, Republican Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina has had quite a journey. He spearheaded a police reform bill in the wake of George Floyd's death, and Senate Democrats blocked his proposal. Now, a growing number of Democrats reportedly say they're ready to wait until next year to overhaul the criminal justice system. Wait. Senator Tim Scott joining me now. Thank you for being with me. I'm going to start right where Brian Yanis just left off. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to talk to people and listen to them to go forward in all of this, but there's not one unified voice. So as you push legislation forward, how do you even have, well, what we haven't seen, emergency hearings?
Well, it would be easy for us to find the right voices in Congress if the Democrats were to come to the table. This is an easy issue for us to solve as it relates to the federal reform of police. That is easy for us to do because we don't control local law enforcement. So we can do things that encourages, incents, or compels behavior. Bottom line, though, is that there is no one place to go for leadership. The Democrats have diffused leadership. There's chaos. I see anarchy in the streets. And this is not in the best interest of the most vulnerable communities that are typically communities of color living in poverty. They don't need chaos in the streets. They can't afford that unleashing of whatever you feel like doing today. That is not in their best interest. It's not in America's best interest. And we're seeing the spikes in New York City, Detroit, Chicago. Killings, robberies, and shootings are escalating. They are sky high, comparatively speaking, the last year. So when you start demonizing all law enforcement, you get anarchy in the streets with fewer officers to respond. And $1 billion out of the New York City Police Department only means that more minorities will be more vulnerable and more will cry out like you just talked about. This is easy to see and also easy to stop.
So look, you've just painted a picture that's really fraught with potholes. I mean, we know it's not going to be a smooth road, but there's glass on the street now in terms of where we're walking.
Without doubt.
Yeah, if you don't have cohesive leadership among the Democrats to help you get there for legislation, and they want to wait until next year, what will the street look like? Because Brian and I were just talking about, they don't have cohesive leadership either. Why haven't there been those emergency hearings on the Hill? Now, look, we're virtual right now. I get it, Senator Scott, that you'd have to do some things. People can't cry. But we've seen other hearings. You can socially distance.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. The answer to your question, Harris, is unfortunately that the Democrats in the Senate have decided that presidential politics trumps taking care of an existential threat to communities of color. Let me just say that differently. The Democrats in the Senate have said that winning this election by campaigning on police brutality is more important than actually solving police brutality in July and August.
You know, things have gotten really raw. We'll step away from politics and just have your own personal story now. Your friend, former Congressman Trey Gowdy, was on my show recently, and I want you to look at how he described where we are. He got choked up, and he invoked your name.
Thank God for someone like Tim Scott in my life who constantly reminds me that when we were kids, we couldn't go to school together. We couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. So think about all the progress we have made, and I need that in my life. I need to focus on the positive. The other thing I would say, Harris, is Republicans need to embrace law as a unifying, equalizing force. I mean, when I hear law and order, I think it means something different to a white person than a person of color, but the law should be equalizing and unifying.
Wow, did you hear those words? That law and order means something different for a white person than a black person. What is he talking about?
Well, he's just talking about the way that we have applied the law in this nation to black communities and white communities. Very different application, especially if you look back in 1965, go to Selma, Alabama. The law enforcement agencies were attacking the peaceful protesters. In 2015, when I was there with John Lewis, it was a law enforcement community that was protecting the walk. So much has changed, and that's one of the things that Trey was talking about. I love that guy. And what he was saying was that We have lived through the times when there was a system that was racist. We saw that. That's part of the 1960s story. What we see today are pockets that need to be dealt with, but demonizing the entire system will not produce a better result, number one. Number two, it's that inconsistent application that erodes confidence in authorities and institutions of authority that leads to chaos. It leads to anarchy. So we can do something about that by putting other people's interests before ourselves as elected officials. Don't think about waiting until after the election. Our cities, most of them liberal, cannot afford to wait for more inaction from liberal Democrat policymakers who have no interest in solving problems today and a lot of interest in winning elections tomorrow. That is a bad formula for a nation that says we're all created equally.
Wow. Senator Tim Scott, your friendship with Trey Gowdy, very special and on display as an example.
Blessed.
Getting you both to talk about the issues tonight. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Yes, ma'am.